Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate this poster in Photoshop. I recently ran across this poster and I thought it'd be a great use case to show off one of my custom silhouette brushes. Now I've got a full bundle of these, but if you want to follow along, I have included a few sample silhouette brushes, including the one I use in this video, in a link in the description of this video. So go ahead, download those, and then let's dive into Photoshop. All right, I'm going to go to File, New. For this, I'm going to make a file that's 1000 wide by 1500 tall. I want this to be 72, and let's go ahead and hit Create. All right, next I want to put in some guides. So I'm going to go to Guides and then New Guide Layout. And this is going to be custom. We're going to set this 3 columns by 6 columns. And for the margins here, I'm going to do 162 for the top, 82 for left and right, and then the bottom will be 244. So 162, 82, 244, and 82. Let's hit OK. I also need one more guide, which is going to be where my subject is standing. So I'm going to go to View, Guides, New Guide. This is going to be a horizontal guide, and this is going to be at 1035. And I'm going to go ahead and make this one a different color. Okay, so now we have our guides in place. I'm going to go ahead and start with just a solid black background. Now I've already defaulted my colors, so I want to make sure black is my foreground color, and then I'm going to go solid color and hit OK. And we can just call this background. All right, next I'm going to go and select this rectangular shape tool. I want to make sure up here that it's on shape. And then I'm going to go ahead and just start from the bottom and go up to this second guide here. So put that in place. Also go ahead and just lock all these on so that it's about that shape there. Now after that's done, I'm actually going to make it just a little wider and then also just a little down further below. All right, so now that that's done, we can call this ground plane. And I'm going to add a little bit of a gradient to this. Now the gradient is going to go from the color CCC to transparent. So I'll go ahead and make that my foreground color. And then here under my layer styles, I'm going to go to gradient overlay. And here I want to reset my list and then go back onto the gradient overlay, and I also want to reset this. This is going to be right here. So if you go under presets, basics, and select that one, you'll have a foreground to transparent. That's what I want. Let's go ahead and hit OK. I'm going to change the angle here to -86. So I want it coming up sort of like that. I'm also going to make this bigger, so I'm going to set this to 131 there. And then with my mouse, I'm just going to go in here and click and then drag this up. Now you'll notice it's not working. This is a little bit of a bug in Photoshop, but if you hit OK here, double click on the gradient again, you'll now be able to click here and move it. So I want to move this so that it's right about there. And then I want to take the opacity down to 60. I'm going to hit OK. And then the next thing I'm going to do is another gradient. And this one's going to start from a slightly darker gray color. So let's go in here to our color. I'm going to set this to 7D, 7D, 7D. Hit OK. And I want to go to my gradient tool. I want this to be on gradients because I actually wanted to make a gradient layer. It's already here set to my foreground color to transparent. That's what I want. And here I want to set this to a radial gradient. Then I'm going to select from this point here, and in reality, I probably should have added a center guide here. You can actually do that by going to View, Guides, New Guide Layouts. And here we're going to just reset this to default, change our columns to 2, and change our row to 2. And that'll give us some nice center guides here. I want to turn this off so it's not clearing my existing guides. And I actually don't need a vertical or a horizontal guide, so I'm going to turn my rows off. I just want this vertical guide there. So I'll hit OK. And to be fair, there was faster ways of doing that, but that's one way that you can get a center guide. So I want to start right here and then click and then start dragging out. I kind of want to drag to right about there, maybe even a little past it. So right about there. Then I want to go here, grab this and start dragging it in. And I'm going to drag it into probably right about there. And I want this kind of light area to go down a bit more. So I'm just going to drag this a little bit to there. And then I'm also going to go back into this gradient and just push it up a little bit more to about there. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now I want this gradient here to only apply to my ground plane. So I'm going to hold down Option, click in between here, and clip this to that layer. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is add my triangle in the middle. So for this, we're going to go back to our fill color here, and I actually want to make sure I don't have this layer selected. So I'm just going to click here in my layers palette and deselect that layer. You can also go to Select and then deselect layers. All right, so here I'm going to set this to CCC, CCC again, and then I'm going to go in here to my shape tool and go to the triangle tool. And I want this triangle to start from right here, go to right there, and right there. So that's where I want it to go. Then I'm going to zoom in here and just push this up to about there. So yeah, you know, I would say about 2 millimeters from this if you're just looking at it as a piece of paper. So about there, and then I am going to go here and I want to add a corner radius to all 3 corners. I'm going to set this to 106 pixels. So just like that. Okay, and then we're going to make 2 copies of this. So I'm going to put this one as triangle blur, and then I'll do Command J to make a copy, and we'll call this one triangle top. And here under my properties, I'm going to go to the mask properties. So there's kind of an inherent mask in any vector mask, which gives us the ability to affect the feather here. So I'm going to set this one to 2. And then for the blur one, let's go back to these. And for the blur one, I'm going to set this one to 122. And now you can see it's giving us that kind of glow effect there. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to add in my subject here, which is going to be our character. So let's go to the top of our layer stack here, and I'm going to go to my brushes, and let's see here if I have my brush. I don't. So I'm going to go to import brushes. Now if you go to the assets folder, I'm going to give you the brush that I end up using. For this, I'm actually going to use my, if I can find it here, I'm going to use my full set of silhouette brushes, which these are really great for adding a person in either a large composite And in an example like this, we can actually use it to create a poster because all the brushes are very high resolution. So let's go in here and open this up. And actually, if I just add a new layer, we can call this subject. And I'm going to go to my brush tool. And here, I'm going to set my color to black. And then right mouse click. And here, I want to look at the brush tip, but not the brush stroke. That way I can see more of these at a time. I'm going to scroll down here, and you can see we have a lot of options here, and a lot of these will work great as our silhouette replacement. But for this, I'm going to use this one right here, and I'm going to set the size of it to 420. And this is where we're going to use our magenta guide here. So I want this centered, so about like that, and I want his foot to be on that magenta guide. So maybe just a few pixels past it. So right about there, and we'll just click once to put him in. Now, once he's placed, we can also just adjust his position a little bit, and I want him right about there. Okay, so we're going to make 2 copies of him. For the first copy, all we're going to do is add a color overlay. So first, let me just make the second copy, and the second copy we're going to call lighting. For now, I'm going to turn that copy off. Let's go back onto our first copy, and I'm going to go down here to our layer styles and add a color overlay. And I'm going to set this to 32, 32, 32. It's kind of a dark gray color. And we'll set this to 100%. Okay, now let's go to our lighting layer. I'm going to set the fill on this to 0. And then we're going to go to our layer styles. And the first layer style I'm going to add here is a satin. And let's go ahead and reset this to default. First, I'm going to go in and adjust the contour here. So I'm going to add a point here and just push this really high up to right about there. And then here for the multiply, I'm going to set this to 25. I'm going to set the angle to 0. And then I'm going to set the distance to 61 and the size to 54. And if you turn that preview on and off, and we can actually do Command semicolon to turn those guides off, you can see that's kind of just making the back of him a little bit darker to give a little more of a 3-dimensionality to our character. Pretty subtle, but it helps. Okay, then after that, we're going to do some inner shadows to have this light behind him kind of wrapping around the character. And we're going to use inner shadows to do it. The advantage of an inner shadow over an inner glow is that within an inner shadow, after changing it into a glow, I have the ability to adjust the angle of it. So I can have a glow that just comes in on one side. So first, let's go ahead and set this to screen. I'm going to set this to white and then set this to pretty low. So we're going to start at just 20 in terms of the opacity. And I'm going to set this first one to 176. I'm going to set the distance to 5 and then the size to 15. So you can see that's adding just a little subtle glow there. Now I'm going to make a copy of this. And for the second copy, I'm going to change the size to 30. So now we have kind of 2 copies of that wrapping around. Now I'm going to do the same, but for the other side. So I'm going to make a copy of this again. Here, I'll set this back to 15. And then I'm going to change the angle to 3. So this will be the light coming in from the other side. I'm going to copy that one more time and set this one to 30. And then I want to go up to my blending options here and turn on Layer Mask Hides Effects. I'm going to hit OK and then add a mask to this layer. I'm going to go to my gradient. For this, I'm going to set it to Classic Gradient, Linear, And then I want to make sure it's going from my foreground color, which is now black, to transparent. I'm going to go from where his foot is to about where the bottom of the triangle is. So just like that. That way the glow effect starts kind of where the triangle starts. Next, I'm going to do a second gradient, and this is going to start down here. I'm going to hold shift again. This one will go to about the middle of his body. Pretty subtle, but it's just adding a slight gradation to the rest of those glows. All right, so there you go. We've now finished him. The next thing we're going to do is add a bit of a shadow effect to him. Now, before I add the shadow effect, I actually want to turn him into a smart object. And to be fair, I should have done this before I made a single copy of him. So let's go down to our subject here. And the other thing I want to do is I actually want the smart object to be the size of my entire canvas. That way, as I'm placing things into it newly, I know where it's placing in the context of the whole canvas. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and turn these two layers off. I'm going to add a new layer. This is going to be my stamp layer. I'm going to do Shift, Option, Command, and E to make a stamp. And we can call this background. And then I'm going to take my subject here, take both of these layers, and go ahead and actually, I want this color overlay to be inside my parent folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this. So just hold down Option and drag it down here, throw away this color overlay, and then take these two layers, left or right mouse click, and then convert to Smart Object. And I'm going to call this subject. And then I'm going to double click in here, turn off the background, and then close it again. And then I'm going to take this color overlay and put it on this layer and then throw this one away. So now I have it as a smart object. I'm going to go ahead and do Command J to make another copy. We'll call this one lighting. And then I'm going to take all these effects and drag them onto this one. And then I'll also go ahead and take this lighting mask and put it on here. Now, when I did it, you'll see that it's having this weird effect on the bottom. And that's because we need to also copy these layer styles. Now we could go here, copy layer style, and then paste layer style, but because we copied all these other layer styles, it might not copy it over. All we have to do is go in here and turn on this layer mask hides effects. Let's hit OK. And then we also need to set our fill to 0. That way we're seeing our layer underneath it. So there you go. We now have this set as a smart object. I'm going to do one more copy of our smart object with Command J, and I'm going to call this one shadow. I'm going to drag this to underneath our subject, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn the guides back on with Command semicolon. So for the shadow, I'm going to go onto my move tool and do Command T for transform. You'll notice that it's the full size of the canvas. So I need to hold down Option and take this anchor point and drag it down to our pink guide down here. If you don't see the anchor point, you can turn it on right there. And then while holding down Option, I'm going to drag this. I'm holding down Option and Shift. I'm dragging this, and you can see that it's kind of doing everything from that anchor point. So this will give me a good, nice shadow effect. So I want to go from there. And then next, I'm going to hold down Shift, Option, and Command all at the same time. Start dragging these out. And then just holding down Shift, I'm going to drag this and get these feet lined up here. And then holding Shift and Command, pull these in, or sorry, Shift and Command and Option, kind of drag these in And I'm trying to get the shoe size there to be about the same as what they were before. So something like this. This is the one challenge about doing it canvas size. If we were doing it the size of the shadow, it would be much easier to adjust this. But you'll see why I wanted to do this shadow in the end. So just like that, and then we're going to set this to multiply. We're going to get the color overlay. We're going to throw that away, and then I'm going to take the opacity on this down to about 45. And then I'm going to add a mask to this layer, go onto my gradient tool. I'm going to make sure this is on classic gradient, linear, and then we're going to go from about this bottom guide here, hold down shift and go to there. And I'm going to do that twice like that. Okay. And then finally, I also want to do just a normal rectangular marquee selection all the way down to my guide there, and then make sure my mask is selected. Black's my foreground color. I'm going to do Option Delete. And then with that same selection still in place, I'm going to go onto my subject and just add a mask. And that's going to make sure that on the horizon line, neither foot is encroaching into the other foot. Okay, so we now have basically everything in place and we're ready to add our titling. So I'm going to go to the top of our layer stack here, make sure white's my foreground color, go to the type tool. And for this, I'm using a font from Google Fonts. It's called Legend Zeta. And for the first title, we're going to be using it in black. And we're going to set the font size to 70. And let's set this to centered. And I'm going to click kind of right in the center here on the bottom guide. And then we're going to type in the draw. I'm going to open up my type panel, which I can do here or by doing Command T. Now that's usually the free transform shortcut, but when you're using the type tool, it brings up your character palettes. So here I want to make sure this is on 220, and it already is. So all this looks good. Let's hit our check mark. Now I do want this to be centered here, so I'm going to just drag this down and just let it snap onto the center there. Okay, here I'm going to go to my layer styles again, and I'm going to go to a stroke. I'm going to put this on center, change the color to white, and set this to 2 pixels. So this is going to make our letters just a little bit bigger, and it's also going to round our corners a little bit. So let's hit OK there. And the other thing we're going to do here is we're going to replace this with a rounded triangle that kind of, repeats this graphic design effect. So to do that, I'm going to first just make a rectangle marquee around my current A shape. And then while holding down Option or Alt, I'm going to click on the mask button. That way it gets rid of my existing one. Now, because I want it as reference, what I can do is double click and just take the density of my mask down for now. And strangely, that seems to only be affecting the effect unless I go here. So strange anomaly there. For the time being, we'll just turn that mask off. So we'll just turn the density to 0 just while I build my little triangle here. So I'm going to go to my triangle, make sure it's on white, make sure it's on shape up here. I don't want a stroke, so I'll set this to 0. And then I'm going to go from the bottom of the A and kind of try to match the shape of the A here. So something like this. And then I'll go here and just drag this in until we're about there. And then I can go back on this mask and set the density back to 100. So that looks good. Then the last thing we need to do is the typography up here. So I'm going to go back onto my type tool. For this, I'm going to use the same font. I'm going to select the triangle up here, make sure I don't change the existing typography here. I'm going to set this to regular, and then I'm going to go down to 20 pixels. So let's just type that in. And then I'm going to click up here and then type in Tom Ruddock. And for this, I'm going to set this to really wide. So 1020 there. And then I want this to be kind of right about there. And then I'm going to hold down Option, make a copy of this to that top guide, set this to 11. Set this to 1060, and this is going to be written and directed by. Okay, so now that we have all that in place, we're ready to give this poster some color. And we're going to do that with a gradient map. So first, let's go here and make sure we're going to set our first color and our last color of our gradient. So your foreground color is always the left side of your gradient, meaning the dark side. So for that one, we're going to do 07, OC, OF. So kind of almost black with just a touch of blue. And then let's go ahead and select our background color. For this, we're going to do a bright red, so FB000C. Hit OK. And then we'll go down here and add a gradient map, and you can see already the effect that that's giving. It's almost halfway there. Okay, but we are going to make some adjustments. So let's click into our gradient editor. I'm going to add another stop, and this stop is going to be at location 27. And for this, I want this to be 680C, 0C. And then I'm going to add another stop, and this one's going to be at 46. And this stop is going to be 920001. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's hit OK. So the last thing I want to do is I want to add that film grain that we see in the original poster. So to do that, I'm going to go to Layer, New, Layer, and we're going to call this film grain. I'm going to set the mode to overlay just so that I have this feature here. So I'm going to turn this on, hit OK, and now you can see I have it set to overlay. But for now, I'm actually going to set this back to normal because I want to turn it into a smart object first. Now that it's a smart object, I can set this to linear light, and I'm going to set the fill to 30. And then we're going to go into filter and go into camera raw. And I really like using the camera raw filter for film grain because I have the ability to adjust the size and the roughness separately. So here I'm going to go to the size and set this to 45. And then for the roughness, I'm going to set this down to 36. So 64, 45, 36. I'm going to hit OK. And there you can see we now have that really cool film grain effect on top of our whole image. And now, because we've done this with our smart object, we can go down here, double click on our subject, turn on this background, and maybe put in a different silhouette, as I've done here. Turn off our background, save it, And just like that, we have a whole new poster. And we can also go to our gradient map and go in here and maybe select a different gradient map. So here, maybe if we have some cool grades, we could select one of these and then have a whole different look. Could also go in here, maybe try one of these green ones, maybe one of these. Each one gives us a whole different look, but because of the file, the way that the file is set up, these are all really easy changes to make. And let's see if we have that original red one. There it is. So there you have it. That's how you can recreate that poster using just a single custom silhouettes brush in Photoshop. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to check out my full set of silhouette brushes, I have included a link to them in the description of this video. They're really fun to play with, and in the bundle, it includes a course on how to put together silhouette composites. So check that out. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, turn on your notifications, and leave a comment. I do read them all. And finally, this week I am releasing a brand new course on photo restoration in Photoshop. So if that's something of interest to you, you've got some old photos or old photo albums that you'd like to restore, check out that brand new course. It teaches you the AI tools for photo restoration and also all the foundational tools in Photoshop for restoring. You also go through a whole bunch of photo restoration projects, from the simple to the really old, really damaged. The course covers it all, and here is a little trailer to show you what you can expect.